It's an agreement which was months in the making and very nearly didn't happen at all. The US and Ukraine mineral deal has finally been signed, granting Washington access to some of Kyiv's most strategic natural resources. But what does this mean for Ukraine's security? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, a pivotal meeting between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky on the sidelines of Pope Francis's funeral helped heal a damaged relationship, paving the way for a mineral deal to be finalised. The revised terms mean Ukraine will not pay back the military aid already provided. So, with a deal sealed, both the US and Ukraine are claiming a form of victory. What's the agreement and what is its significance?
Described as an historic agreement, the US and Ukraine signed their long-awaited minerals deal last week.
This partnership allows the United States to invest alongside Ukraine to unlock Ukraine's growth assets, mobilize American talent, capital, and governance standards that will improve Ukraine's investment climate and accelerate Ukraine's economic recovery.
Under the agreement, the US will gain access to Ukraine's minerals, such as titanium and graphite, as well as its coal and natural gas, which wasn't included in the original deal. That fell apart in February after a fiery meeting between Trump and Zelensky in the Oval Office.
You don't have the cards right now.
A turning point in negotiations came when the two leaders gathered privately at the Vatican before the Pope's funeral.
The agreement has changed significantly during the preparation process. Now it is a truly equal agreement that creates an opportunity for investments in Ukraine, quite significant ones.
The US is already preparing to approve its first sale of military support to Ukraine. As part of the deal, it will be 10 years before the US benefits from the profits of the agreement. Instead, they'll be used to help rebuild Ukraine. Russia has alleged that Zelensky was forced into signing the deal by Trump, framing it as a diplomatic defeat for Kyiv. So, how important is this agreement for Ukraine? Does it ensure its security and a peace deal? Or is this just the beginning of a new chapter in geopolitical rivalry?
Well, let's speak first to the Ukrainian MP, Alexei Goncharenko. Alexei, just give us your thoughts on the minerals deal. Is this good news for your country?
In general, yes, because we need as much cooperation with the United States as possible. And this is the way to have United States engaged and have an economic interest in Ukraine. For us, the main question definitely is security. So we hope that it will lead to further military cooperation between Ukraine and the United States, including military supplies, because if we want to survive, and we want not just to survive, but to succeed, we need American support, military support, because of Russian war of aggression against us.
And Alexei, what have Ukrainian people been saying to you then about the minerals deal? Are they happy?
There are some discussions. Many people, different people have different thoughts, but the most important for people is under security. So everybody are interested, will it lead us to security? And here we more count on the United States goodwill, I would say, because nothing directly is not said in this deal. So Americans say that the deal itself is a kind of part of security guarantees. Because in the deal, you will not find anything about security. We hope that they will do what they're saying, because for Ukrainian people, the most important definitely is security. What was important is that there is no any depths in this deal. So Ukraine is not agreeing retroactively on debts for the support we received for the moment from the United States. It's important for us. And also what is important for us is that these deals should not be an obstacle in our way of European integration.
And Alexei, do you think the presence then in the future of American workers on Ukrainian soil will be enough of a deterrent from Putin coming again?
Itself not, but as a part of package of guarantees, yeah, it can be, because more cooperation with the United States will make United States more interested in the success of Ukraine and in security of Ukraine. And we clearly understand that there are two countries which Russia is afraid of. It's China and the United States. So that's important for us. We still are in the process of discussions inside the country. We are waiting for some additional agreements, which should be also made. But in general, that's the right direction.
And Alexei, as soon as the minerals deal was signed, we saw the aid flowing again, military support coming once more from the United States. That was important.
Definitely, it is important. We hope that it will continue and it will increase, because for the moment, we're speaking about just 2 new contracts for $50 million and I think 300. We hope it will be much more. And also, we hope that President Trump will continue his efforts to reach peace, because he said famously that he will end the war in 24 hours. Now it's already more than 100 days passed. So we hope that he will finally put pressure on Putin, because the only obstacle to peace is Vladimir Putin and Russian will to continue this war.
And finally, Alexei, just give us an impression of how much mineral wealth Ukraine actually has.
It's quite complicated question. First of all, part of our mineral wealth is on the occupied territories. Others will definitely need investments. That's why this deal is mutually beneficial, because Ukraine needs investments. Ukraine needs technologies to produce these minerals. So there are different estimations up to trillions of dollars, so thousands of billions of dollars. It's hard for me to say what exactly is right, but Ukraine is a rich country.
Well, let's meet the rest of our guests. Joining me in the studio, I'm delighted to say we've Sean Bell, he's Air Vice Marshal and military analyst. Paul Ingram is a research affiliate at the Centre for the Study of Existential Risk, that's at the University of Cambridge. And in Washington, D.C., we've Michael Ryan, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defence for European and NATO policy. You're all very welcome to Roundtable. Mike, I'll come to you first. Just give us your impression of the US-Ukraine minerals deal. Is it a win-win for both?
Yes, I think it is. I see it exactly the same way as Alexei Goncharenko. There's a lot to be learned going forward as we deepen the relationship between the United States and Ukraine. Any aspect in international relations has a domestic political component, and this is no different. But I think in the main, it invests the United States in the future success of Ukraine in an area that gets a lot of political focus right now, and that is the availability of critical minerals. So I do think it's a win-win. Thanks,
Mike. Sean, to you, some critics are arguing this is a very brazen resource grab, an opportunistic move by the king of the deal, if you like, President Trump, or is it more nuanced?
I think if you wind the clock back a few weeks, then I think one might have been fair to justify that actually President Trump was coercing President Zelensky into this deal. And actually, this is all about paying for the war. And let's be quite clear, wars cost a lot of money. And actually, this country only finished paying off a debt to America in 2006 after the Second World War. So it is entirely reasonable we need funds. But at the time, it seemed a bit one-sided. I think now what's been very clear is that China is the target for America's trade tariffs. China's turned around and gone, we control 70% of the rare earth minerals. In fact, we control 90% of the refining. We're going to stop America having those. And they are critical to a whole bunch of American industries, whether it's battery technology, military or space. As a result, President Trump desperately needs new supplies of these rare earth minerals. And therefore now, all of a sudden, rather than being a weighted conversation, both sides, Ukraine and America, both have something positive to get out of this deal. And I think that's why we've finally seen it over the line.
Thanks, Sean. Paul, it was interesting, our Ukrainian MP friend, Alexei, the one word he repeated several times in each answer was security. I mean, that's what it's all about for Ukraine here, isn't it?
Well, yes, and this deal is not going to provide any significant security for a long time to come. It's going to take a while for these arrangements to come to any sort of action on the ground. So we're not actually talking about American people engaging in mining activities anytime soon, and hopefully not before the end of the war, because this war, I hope, is not going to be lasting as long as it takes to get mining operations started. So I do think that this is actually at least as much about symbolism and the long term. So the long term, yes, this is an opportunity to raise cash, to pay for debts, to get Ukraine back on the wagon, so to speak. But it's also a message to the American people that President Trump is not about to just give away the shop. He's looking for some advantage, at least in the long run, for American role in that part of the world.
Mike, that's a very good point, isn't it, about the American people? What message is Trump sending to your taxpayers?
Well, I think it's a very positive message that fits well within his overall approach to the American taxpayer. And that is, we're not letting people take advantage of America. And I'm not saying Ukraine has been taking advantage of America, but the perspective in the political debate here in the United States is that we're giving something. We want to give something to Ukraine, but in the long run, we're going to benefit from this relationship. So it is very much in our interest to continue to support Ukraine. And I think that sells very well. Most of the Americans, particularly in the Republican Party, want to continue to support Ukraine. But this shows that it's not an open-ended commitment, that we are trying to achieve peace, but at the same time, we're making a loan, not a grant. And as Mr. Bell said, quite rightly, it's not unusual. The UK has just finished up paying their loans for World War II.
Well, Mike, allow me to play devil's advocate here. Some people might want to know what America gets from open-ended support of Israel. There doesn't seem to be any minerals payback or anything there, does there?
No, but in the broadest strategic sense, we have peace and stability in the Middle East, which keeps America from having to get heavily involved there, which in the grand strategic view of the world is very beneficial to the United States. And if I could just take a moment to mention on Ukraine two things. I'm on the board of directors of a critical metals company. We have an asset in Ukraine, and we're ready to go to work as soon as peace is established. And so there will be Americans in there. The other aspect that we have to think about with the Ukraine minerals deal is the Chinese want to buy up minerals all the way around the world so that they can maintain their monopoly, not by developing those assets, but just by keeping them off the market. So it is important that we get in there, we get to work. It's a long-term perspective that we have to take, but we do need to get after it quickly.
Well, we're joined now from New York by Andrei Dobryansky. He is Director of Communications and Media. That's at the Ukrainian Congress Committee of America. Andrei, you've been listening to what everyone's been saying. Just give us your take on the minerals deal. Is it good news for the people of Ukraine?
It's a good deal for everybody. It's a win-win deal. For Ukraine, however, not only is there investment for the future for the reconstruction of Ukraine, but this is another way that Ukraine and the United States can have ongoing conversations. Ukraine has had that with the diplomatic track, with the military track. Now there's an established economic commerce track for the United States and Ukraine to have constant conversations. And that's always for the benefit of two allies.
Sean, to you, how much of this then, picking up on the Chinese involvement, how much of everything that has happened so far with this deal is about keeping Chinese paws, if you like, off Ukrainian mineral wealth?
Well, the danger is we can examine little facets of this and all the symptoms of it. The main purpose of this, though, is ultimately it's Ukraine has a need, and there is a deal here that suits both parties. I think very early on in this deal, there was concern that President Zelensky, he needs to fund the war, but he also, President Trump clearly wants to bring the war to an end. He can force, in a way, President Zelensky to the table. He can't force President Putin to the table. And I think they felt like this deal was being linked to an end to the war. I don't think that's going to be possible without some form of security guarantee. We heard that from Alexei early on. And therefore, if for those who are looking for an end to the war and the minerals deal being part of that, No. But does this just incrementally move the dial a bit? American interests, I'm sure President Putin will not be happy that this deal has been done. It more closely aligns America with Ukraine. Does it solve the war? No, it doesn't. There's still a lot more water to flow under that bridge. Russia is still on the front foot. But all of this helps keep Ukraine in the fight, and there's still a lot more negotiation to come.
Paul, you travel to Russia on a regular basis. You're often invited to speak there. How do you think Putin in particular and the Russians in general will be seeing this deal?
Well, I think they'll be seeing it two ways. The first way, and less important, is that they will be seeing it as the Americans extracting some quid pro quo from the Ukrainians. But I think more importantly, the Russians will see this as a demonstration that the Americans are not playing a mediating middle ground role. So Trump has been saying for ages that this is Biden's war and he wants it to end. I think the Russians' perspective would be this demonstrates that Trump is now making it his war, and that the Russians will now just open the taps and go for the spring or the summer offensive, and that this will, in the short term, encourage the Russians to go more in. So I would agree with Sean. I don't think that this deal is actually very relevant to the next few weeks or months when it comes to the military action on the ground, other than probably make it worse in terms of provoking, in the Russians' mind, provoking them to make wins on the ground, to demonstrate to the Americans that they're not in control.
Mike, what does this do for America's credibility then as an honest broker when it comes to negotiations, the peace deal, mediating at the table? Does it remove America from that equation?
Well, you know, it's really interesting how quickly the coin flips. President Trump was criticized very early on for trying to be an honest broker because it looked like he was taking Russia's side. Now, here we are 100 days later, and he's being accused of taking the Ukrainian side. Well, it's a negotiation. And so there's a back and forth, and it's all going to come down into the end game, at which time President Trump, I believe, will start talking about security guarantees. He's kept that off the table because that's his leverage when every side has gone as far as they can go, the Russians, the Ukrainians, the Europeans, in reaching an endurable and sustainable peace agreement. He has the advantage in the end of offering to put U.S. forces on the ground in Ukraine or significant U.S. strategic assets in Europe to support Europeans in Ukraine. That's, if you pardon the pun, the trump card that he has that he's not going to show until the end game. So there's still a long way to go. Having the United States invested in Ukraine increases his leverage over President Putin, which is something that he needs to start doing gradually in order to bring Putin to the table, which is what he's been trying to do all along.
And Mike, it's worth pointing out that under the terms of the deal, Ukraine won't be heavily in debt from the early years of support in the war from America. Mike, you know, there won't be any retrospective payback.
Yes, that we'll just take all that as a grant, and now we're going to start talking about loans.
Well, Andre, as I was listening to Mike there, I could see you shaking your head. You don't agree.
Well, I'm just going to point out that there are no grants here. The United States was investing money in the United States. It was an enormous stimulus package for the American people. 80% of the money's staying in the United States, especially in overwhelmingly Republican states. Other than California, 5 other states received over $1 billion of this money to replenish U.S. arms supplies that would have otherwise had to have been paid back to Raytheon and other arms manufacturers to be disposed of. This was a cost-free disposal method for the United States, and what we're doing is we're replenishing those weapons. As far as what's happening currently in Ukraine and the New Deal, yes, there are no, there is specifically mentioned that there will be no payback of whatever that cost is. Ukraine will not be paying for the salaries of arms manufacturers in the United States, nor will it be paying for the disposal of weapons. It does it by itself on the battlefield. And this is really the win-win for the United States, so long as it's able to keep supplying Ukraine with weapons, which are two deals which were announced shortly after the signing of the minerals agreement. Then the United States is in line with its official policy. It is law in the United States that the United States will aid Ukraine in the return of its sovereign lands. That's just the law, and it's been like that since 2014.
Sean, to you, it's hard not to feel sympathy for the Ukrainian people, almost as if the family jewels are being auctioned off to pay for the future. Do you get that sense?
Not at all, no. I mean, let's be clear. If you wind the clock back to 2022 and the full Russian invasion, I don't think many of us military really thought Ukraine stood a chance. The 40-mile convoy, the attack on Kyiv, and it was only through the incredible bravery of the Ukrainian people that they withstood that. And then they actually managed to withstand the full Russian onslaught, and they've continued to do that. But let's be clear, they are a David against the Russian Goliath. If they get trapped into a war of attrition, it's a war which they will lose. So they've been heavily reliant on the Western support to enable that to happen. That Western support is high-tech weapons, and exactly many of these weapons we provided are older weapons. The UK has been exactly the same, weapons that we might otherwise have had to dispose of, because bluntly, we don't trust the Ukrainians with the high-end weapons because they could fall into the hands of the Russians. We don't want that to happen. And therefore, the beauty of what's happened at the moment is that Ukraine's managed to develop a relationship with the West, has been supported. That has been a key part of withstanding the Russian onslaught. And although Russia is on the front foot as we speak today, they're paying an enormous price on the battlefield, largely due to those weapons, majority provided by the American partners there, but that's proving absolutely invaluable. This is about a war of national survival for Ukraine, and bluntly, they need to do everything possible to survive this onslaught.
So, Paul, if I were to paint a scenario to you, 2 years down the line, and American personnel are working at a mine somewhere in Ukraine, and there is a stray Russian bomb or a landmine, and American personnel get injured as a result of Russian actions, then what happens?
Well, I think it's important to say that we won't have American personnel on the ground in 2 years' time.
Say staff of a mining company then.
So there is a need to have a geological survey. The surveys currently are very out of date, so we don't actually know for any accuracy how much there is there. So there's a survey. So let's say there's an American involved in the survey that gets injured. I don't think that the US is as sensitive as that they would go to war on the basis of one or two people being injured as a result of a stray Russian missile. This is not that sort of trigger. I think the bigger concern is if the Americans or the Europeans get involved in a direct shooting war because they have, I don't know, given a no-fly zone in Western Ukraine or something like this. That is not this Ukraine. That is not this minerals deal. So my big picture on this, I think, is something similar to what Sean was saying, is that it's almost irrelevant directly to the conduct of the war in the short term. It's much more about reconstruction. It's much more, and which is really important, you know, to the future of Ukraine. And I think it isn't about just exploiting Ukraine. It is about states getting together and bringing in resources for Ukraine to be reconstructed in the long run. This is a really big challenge. It's as difficult as fighting a war, is reconstructing a country afterwards. And so in that respect, this minerals deal is a good deal for Ukraine in the longer run.
Sean.
Enda, I just wanted to make the point that we've got to be careful not to over-focus on American folks. As we speak today, there are a number of international people on the ground helping Ukraine. There are from all different nationalities. Exactly as Paul says, the key is the West prepared to put boots on the ground to start engaging in active fighting? To date, there's been no appetite to do that. That does not mean there are no American personnel, British personnel or others on the ground. Therefore, nothing would change.
Thanks, Sean. Andre, just final point back to you. President Trump, everything we know about him, he's not a patient man, is he? Mining projects take a very long time. Planning, surveys, extraction. President Trump, when's he going to see a return then on this investment?
Well, you can say that he's not a patient man, but is he a focused man as well? I anticipate that within the next several weeks, the state of the United States economy is going to be much more pressing on the president's head, as well as in the American public. And in that case, the two recent deals that were announced, the permission for $50 million in weapon sales, money from outside the United States to come in to purchase new weapons, as well as the $350 million deal of training Ukrainian fighters on F-16s and other European fighters. This is the kind of monetary deal that President Trump, I assume, will be looking for as the economy takes a nosedive for the worst, and the worst case scenario being a recession. Ukraine has been a steadfast partner here. It has only benefited the United States economy and the United States worker for this entire weapons project going forward. And I think that the Americans would be rather silly to throw away a decent partnership like that, a partnership with a proven partner that has assisted in NATO deployment since the mid-90s. This is a long-standing partner. They're interested in helping the United States as much as the United States is helping them.
Andre, we'll keep across it. Thanks for your time today, Sean and Paul here in the studio as well. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable, TRT World. But for now, from me, Enda Brady, and all the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.